So hello guys, so welcome to my session. So in this session I'm going to cover the demo session, like what the course content I have to cover in this session. Okay, so here I'm covering these topics. So this session is for the very, I have started from the very basic level, like very from the scratch level. So if you don't know anything about the Kubernetes, so this will be good for them. So in the series, in the session first, I will to cover about what is Kubernetes. I have explained the Kubernetes architecture, what is master node, what is worker node, what all the component of master node and worker node, what is pod, what is worker node. So those things I will explain. Like I will explain about the component of master node and worker node. What are the function of etcd? What are the function of scheduler? What is the role of kube API server? What is the role of kubelet? What is role of container runtime? And what are the impact? If because this is a very important or common question, like sometime interview ask you, tell me if my API server down, what are the impact over the pod, what are the impact over the application, if my scheduler down, if my etcd down, if my kubelet down, what are the impact over the application or over the cluster. So those things we will discuss in very explained way about the architecture, and we can discuss more about each and every component, what are the use and what are the role, and what are the impact if they down, they will be down. Okay, so those things we will discuss in this session. In the session 2 I will create the Azure AKS cluster from the scratch. I have set up the jump box where we can connect our cluster. We can install the plugins like kubectl, Aegis CLI, Docker client, everything I will explain you. So here you can see I have already created two Kubernetes cluster. So cluster 1 and cluster 2, and we have also deployed the application there. So kubectl get pod. So here you can see I have I have created a lot of issue here. So these are the production level issue, like sometimes you are getting this type of issue, like sometimes pods are getting pending state, sometimes pods are in crash loopback state, sometimes pods are in image pullback error, sometimes pod is stuck in container creating state. So what is the root cause of the issue, how do we fix the issue? So those things we will discuss in detail. Okay, so I have already created multiple application there. If you see here kubectl get pod -a, so you can see a lot of applications running here, the Tomcat application, Velero applications, and few pods are down. Okay, so those things we will discuss in this session. And the session 3 we can deploy the pod using the YAML file. If we stuck the OM, if we getting the OM killed error, if we pod is stuck in pending state, if pod in crash loopback state, how do we fix the issue? And we can discuss about the private repository. So private repository is the repository where we can manage all the images, like application image. So we can also created the image here. If you see here, this is my container registry. So in the registry, if you go here repository, so you can see my images are there. So you can see Tomcat and Ubuntu images are there. So how we can push and pull the image? Okay, so here in this session I will cover how do we push the image, how do we pull the image, how do we assign the tag, how do we import the secrets. Because if you see here, you can see a lot of pods are image pullback error because of we haven't defined the secrets. See here the image pullback error, and kubectl get pod -n tomcat. So this is a command to see the status of the pod in particular namespace. And if you see here, if you want to see the manifest file of this application, so you have to run this command kubectl edit pod -n tomcat. And here you can see I am using the private container private registry, and we can define the path of my path of my repository. See prod scr repository, and this is the image name. If you go there, this is my image, and this is by the tag, and you can see this is the path. So I have defined the registry path in my deployment file, and you can see they can easily pull the image from my private repository. So how they can authenticate, so we will discuss about the authentication, how my Kubernetes authenticate with the private repository. So those things we will discuss in detail, like how do we authenticate our Kubernetes cluster with the private repository. So how do we push and pull the image, like from your local machine to the repository. So those things we will discuss in detail. How do we import the secret, how do we create the image pull secrets. Okay, and this one we can cover about the storage part, like how do we create the volume, persistent volumes, and how do we integrate with the application with the volumes. So I have already created the volumes also in my lab, and after you can also create your lab and you can perform all the activity. So here you can see settings. So kubectl get pvc. So you can see here I have created the pvc. Some pvc are in bound state, some pvc in pending state. So how do we fix this issue? Also pvc level issue troubleshooting, I will show you how do we fix this issue. And this is the pod level troubleshooting, this is the pvc level troubleshooting, where we can fix our issue on the pvc level. Sometimes your pvc are stuck in pending state, it is not or inactive state. If you see the bond state, bond means your PVC in active state. If it is bond, if it is in pending state, how do we? It means it is in not in bond state, it is not in active state. So how we have to learn, like how do we create the persistent volume, how do we troubleshoot related, how do we fix the issue related to PVC, how do we extend the PVC. Sometimes you are getting the error, like sometimes your PVC has been increased. Okay, you go there and you can see this type of ticket. When you work in the production environment, you will get this type of incident, and in this incident you can see your persistent volume has been 89% full. Okay, so how do we fix the issue, this type of issue? How do we increase the volume, or how we can perform this activity to fix the issue? Sometimes you will getting the application is restarted frequently. You can see 300 times this application is restarting. So how do we fix the issue? What is the OM killed error? How to fix the issue? You can see here in the, this is my production environment application. You can see 42 GB assigned the memory, but still we are getting the memory error. So how do we fix the issue? So here you can, I have to see, you can see here the backup related session. I will explain like how do we, what is the architecture to set up the Velero backup on the Kubernetes, how do we take the backup of entire namespace, how do we restore. So if you see here, so kubectl get ns. So I have already set up the backup application as a pod. So see, I am going to expand, I am going to see all the resource which is inside this namespace. Okay, so kubectl get all -n Velero. So Velero is the application to for the, it is the backup tool which we are going to take the backup and we can restore. So you can see here my backup application running, and now I am going to take the backup of this namespace. Okay, kubectl get all -n tomcat. You can see there's two pods up and running in this namespace. Now I'm going to delete this namespace. So kubectl delete all -all. So if you define the -all, it means they will delete all the resource which is running inside this namespace. Okay, so be careful about to define the namespace. If you define the namespace with different application, different project, then they will delete all the resource. Now you can see they are going to delete all the resource which is inside this namespace. Now let's take the backup. of this. Oh, so I have already take the backup. If you see here, Velero get backup. So I will explain in a very detailed way, like how do we take the backup. So it's just a demo session. So I'm going to see. I have already take the backup of this namespace. So now I'm going to take the restore. Okay. So we have to use this command for the restoration. So you have to define the name of the backup. So you have to define the name of the backup. So my backup name is Tomcat Backup 2. So this is my backup name. Now I'm going to restore. So now you can see my restore has been successfully restored. So kubectl, let's see the status. Kubectl get restore and define. Sorry, we have to run this command Velero get restore -n Velero. So now you can see my restoration has been completed. See, completed. Now let's see the status. Kubectl get ns. Kubectl get ns. So here you can see your Tomcat namespace. So if you go inside kubectl get all -n Tomcat. So now you can see the 50 seconds ago they have restored from the backup. So in this way I did in my production environment also. I did the same way. I have set up the Velero tool in my Kubernetes cluster, and we have take the same way to backup, and we have to restore it. So now you can see I have restored it from, you can see the age 50 seconds ago. So in this way I will explain about the architecture of backup tool, how it work, where they can store the backup data. If you want to see, I will show you. So if you go there, storage account, so this is the storage account where our backup data is stored. So this is the, also you can validate like your backup is successfully or not. You can also validate from here also. So you have to go to container, you have to go to bucket, and you can see here the folder backup, and you can see here your backup name. So I will discuss in detail like how do we integrate our Kubernetes cluster with this storage account, how we can authenticate. So we can create the service principal, and for this we can authenticate our Kubernetes cluster with the other Azure service. Okay, so those things we will discuss in detail in the coming session. So let's come to our topic. So in this session I will cover about the how to set up the backup tool, how do we take the backup, how do we can restore, so everything, how do we schedule the backup, how do we delete the backup and restore, how do we take the full backup of entire namespace. So we will discuss in very detailed way, and this is the session 7 where we can discuss about the cluster upgradation. So what are the because cluster upgradation is a mandatory task. Every 3 months and 6 months you have to upgrade the cluster. So what are the pre-planning, what are the post-planning during the cluster upgradation, what are the challenges faced during the cluster upgradation. So those things we will discuss in this session, because this is the very mandatory task, and definitely the interview ask you, like if you mention like you have already worked in the Kubernetes project, so definitely interview ask you about you, like have you done the cluster upgradation. So if you did the cluster upgradation, how do you plan the cluster upgradation, what are the planning, which type of challenges you face during the cluster upgradation. So after complete this session you can easily explain about this, like how do we upgrade the cluster, which type of challenges we face. So those things we will discuss in this session. And the session 8 we can discuss about the service, like how do we access the application. Suppose you have deployed this application. Okay, so suppose you have deployed this application. Let me show you. So kubectl get all hyphen end. So suppose I am deploying this RabbitMQ application. Okay, so I want to access this application. So how do we access this application? You have created the pod. Okay, so the end user, the customer or the client, how do we access this application? So for that we have to create the service, like you can see node port service, cluster IP service, load balancer service. These are the three types of service which are the Kubernetes providers. Okay, so apart from this service also there are multiple service which generally we use in the Kubernetes production environment. So these are the service. So I have already also created the load balancer service. Now let's try to access this application. Okay, so I have created load balancer service. So in the coming session I will explain you how do we create the service and how do we access the application. So once you create the load balancer service, you will get the external IP, the public IP. Okay, so let's go and we have to access my application. So you have to run your public IP in the browser and then you can see your application is accessible. So this contour application I have created, and this is a RabbitMQ order service application. You can see storefront. So this is the application I have created, and you have to see, like if you want to add cart, you can see the cart has been added. So if you go here cart, and you can check out order submitted successfully. So in this way you can access your application. Okay, so but in the production environment you can't use this type of service. So if you interview ask you, okay, you have deployed some RabbitMQ application, or you have deployed some Flipkart related or some e-commerce application you have deployed, and which service you have to access. If you explain like you have to use the node port service or cluster IP service, load balancer service, then definitely the interview they have idea like you haven't worked in the production environment, because in the production environment we are not using this type of service, the cluster IP, load balancer, node port. Okay, and the next question, like this if you run this application in the production environment, you have to secure your application, right? This is not secure. So how do we secure this application? Okay, and how do we create the records? Because you have to access by using the URL like www.flipkart.com or www.jenkins.com. So you have to resolve this IP address to the host name. So how do we create the records? How do we request to create the records with the AD team or security team? So those things we will explain. So how do we resolve this IP to the host name, and how do we secure our application? How do we create the TLS certificate? How do we create the SSL certificate? How do we import our SSL certificate into the application? So those things we will discuss in detail, so that you will get the real-time exposure of Kubernetes, and you can understand in this way, like we have to work in the production environment. You have to secure what are the tasks, what are the steps you have to follow to secure your application. Okay, those things we will discuss in detail. It's just a demo session, so I just give the overview what things we have to cover in my course content. Okay, so these are the topics. So here, like you sometimes you are getting this type of issue, your application you are not working. So if you go here, I also encounter this type of issue when you run the URL of the application, and you can see your application is not accessible. See here, yeah, your connection has timeout. URL is not opening, and please check the attaching a screenshot for reference. So this is the issue I received from one of the application team. like they were not able to access the application, and they were facing this type of issue. Okay, the URL is not opening. So how do you fix the issue? What is the root cause of the issue? So those things we will discuss in the explain way, in the detailed way, like how do you fix the issue, what is the root cause. Sometimes this is also the very common question the interview asks you about, if the your application URL is not opening, so how do you fix the issue, what is the root cause. So similar way, you can see I have created the what all the issue I faced in my Kubernetes project. So based on that, I have taken the screenshot, and I will discuss with you like each and every screenshot, like what is the root cause of the issue, how do you fix the issue. You can see here one of the application pod in crash loop back state, see, and how do we check the logs. Okay, how do we check the events of the application, how do we see the logs to root cause of the issue, so that we can work accordingly. There are hundred there's multiple root cause of the issue, like when your application is in crash loop back, or your application in uh, your application is not working. So there are multiple root cause of the issue. So for that, we can check the logs of the application, we can find the root cause of the issue, and then we can fix the issue. Okay, so you can see here this issue happened because of status code 403 due to authorization issue. So how do we like overcome this issue? I have fixed this issue in my lab also. I will show you the in my lab. You can see I have created a lot of issue here. So you can see my pod is having OM kill error, my pod in pending state, my pod in crash loop back state, my pod in image pullback error, my pod in container creating state. So I will fix all the issue in the same lab. And when you can also understand, and you can also perform in your lab also to fix all the issue. Okay, so those things we will discuss in detail. The second one, the horizontal pod autoscaler. So this one also like this is the automation of the Kubernetes. Suppose this OM kill error happened due to the less memory. Okay, so suppose in this SQL DB application have more traffic, so more traffic, then uh, then this application crashes due to the lack of memory. Okay, the similar issue, if you should go here, see here your application crashing like 300 times, and when I check the logs and event, I found this application getting OM killed. So OM kill generally issue related to the memory related issue, like uh, your application doesn't have sufficient memory to handle the traffic. Because if we describe the application, I found that they have 42 GB memory they have. You can see here 44,346 MB. It means around 44 GB memory assigned for this application, but it's still getting OM killed error. So how do we fix the issue? Like for that, we have to connect our cluster, we have to increase the size of memory. Okay, this is the one way to fix the issue. So this is the manually task. So it's not a good behavior, like every suppose in the Flipkart e-commerce, you have to deploy, you have to manage e-commerce website. Okay, so let me show you. Suppose I have deployed the e-commerce website where my application is up and running. Okay, then in the sale time, sometime the big billion say big billion sale, or sometime the company give the more discount in festival season. So at that time the traffic will be more high on this application. So how do we overcome this issue? Like if the traffic increase, then your application has been crashed, okay, and they are getting OM killed error. So in this case we have to increase the size of memory and CPU so that they can take more traffic, okay. So this is the manual task, but how do we, it's not a good be a good practice to do, like you have to each and every time you have to increase the size of the memory and CPU. So to overcome this issue, what we have to implement, we have to implement the horizontal pod auto scaler. We have to set up the SPA on the deployment level, and now we have to increase the size, increase the traffic. Let's see what happened. Okay. So this is the command to generate the load over the application. Okay, so let's generate the loads. Let's see what happened. Okay, so I've run this command. So we have to delete this pod. So this is a pod created. This is the load generator pod. So we have to delete pod. Now it's deleted. Let's run this command to generate the more traffic over this application. So before that we have to see here kubectl get all. So here in this we have created the HPA. So in this service you can see we have defined the target. So in the target, like if my traffic is increased more than 50%, like if my load is increased over the application more than 50%, then automatic they can create the more pod. So if the more application will be created, then traffic will be distributed among with the pod. So we have so if interview asks you, okay, you have set up the HPA, like if you increase the traffic, then pod will be created. So in the so you have to, so how do we like set up the maximum threshold? Like if you haven't defined the threshold, like how much maximum pod will be created. So if the traffic will be more, then it's automatic create 100 pod. So if 100 pod created, then this will be impact over my budget also, okay. So you have to create some upper limit, like the application pod created up to the 10 pod or 15 pod or 20 pod. So those things we will define in this service. Like when you create the this service, you have to define the maximum pod, like how much maximum pod will be created. If you see here application, so my account has been freeze. Let me again connect. kubectl get pod, kubectl get all. So in this object you can see here we have defined the maximum pod 10 pods, so minimum 1 pod and maximum 10 pods. So you can also customize this one. You can define maximum 5 pod and maximum 4 pod, or you can define minimum 3 pod. So minimum 3 pod means if the traffic will be low, then automatic the pod will be deleted and they can reach to the original configuration, like what we have defined this application. So right now we have defined only 1 pod. So if the less traffic, if they have more traffic, then they can reach up to 10 pod, and they have less traffic, then automatically they can delete the new pods. So now we have to increase the size of increase the traffic over this application. So for that we have to run this command. Now the traffic is going on. So let's see like what is the target one, what are the load over this application, and we can currently we have only one pod. Then you can see multiple pods will be created. Now let's see kubectl get all. Now you can see no, still they have the 0% target. We have to again run the command to generate the load. So let's wait for a few seconds to generate the load. So in this session we have covered the SPA about like how do we overcome this OM kill issue. This is the by using the SPA, and this is the TLS certificate. We have already explained like about this application, like how do we secure our application, how do we generate the TLS and SSL certificate, how do we make sure your application should be running HTTPS, and this is the monitoring, like how do we monitor our Kubernetes cluster, which tool we have to monitor. Okay, now we have to stop our load generator. Now see, you can see here your target is 147%, and you can see automatic pod has been created. See, 19 seconds ago you can see automatic pod has been created. So in this way, like if the traffic more, then automatic pod created. If traffic less, automatic they can delete the pod. So you don't need to increase the scale up the application and scale down the application manually. So in this way you can increase the you have to automatic scale up the application as per the needs. So after a few minutes you can see like I have stopped the load. Now you can see automatic this pod will be deleted. So once the load uh, will be normal. Now you can see 166% load over this, and you can see the replica tree created. Okay, so after 1 minute I will show you like how they will automatic delete this new pod. This is pending because we have capacity issue over this cluster, and if you want to see I will show you. So kubectl get pod, kubectl get pod, okay, I have mentioned 2 times pod. So you can see insufficient CPU. So we have issue with the cluster level because it's free version. That's why we have some capacity over. We have limited quota on the Azure resource. So we have because we have created 2 clusters. So that's why we have capacity issue over the cluster. But in the production environment, you have to. There is no issue. Like the application pod will be created with running state, and after you can see the my load has been decreases. You can see after a few seconds this pod will be deleted automatic. Okay, now let's come to the monitoring part. So we have to use the monitoring. We have to use the Grafana as a monitoring tool. So you can see here I have set up already the Grafana tool, and this is the utilization, like the cluster level utilization, node level utilization, pod level utilization. You can easily monitor your cluster, and you can also trigger the alert because in the production environment you have 100 plus cluster and 200 plus cluster. So it's very hard to manage to monitor all the cluster. Like sometimes they issue with one of the cluster. Okay, suppose uh, there is one of the pod in pending state. So how do we get the notification like this application having issue? Okay, So you don't need to go to connect the cluster and you have to check each and every minute manually. So you have to set up the alert mechanism over the cluster. If any issue happened over the cluster, then automatic you will get the email notification over your mail ID. See, you can see here, I will get the fired alert, and you can see here in this alert, in this alert message, you can see affected resource. This is my cluster name where the issue happened, and here you can see the detail of the alert name, the cluster name, the container name. So in this pod having the issue, this is the pod name. So you can see every 1 minute, every 5 minutes I'm getting the notification about the status of the cluster. Some pods having issue, they have fire. Some pods have, I have fixed the issue, then we can get the notification like your issue has been fixed. You can see the resolved. And even you can also, so how do we configure the alert mechanism over the cluster? Like if you see the severity 3 alert and some pods are fired, so you can see now this is a new message. So how do we set up the alert? So this is the very mandatory task, because we have in the production environment you have 200 300 plus cluster, so it's very hard to manage to work on the issue. Okay, so in this way you have to monitor the you will see the, you will get the notification over the mail, then you have to connect the cluster, and then you have to uh, see the pod's name, and then you have to fix the issue. Okay, so this is the monitoring and alerting related the topics we will cover. This is the migration related topic, like how do we migrate our on-prem Kubernetes cluster to cloud. So those things we will explain in the architecture. Okay, how do we migrate resource from cluster 1 to cluster 2? Suppose this is my cluster 1. Okay, so this is, I have two cluster, prod 1 and prod 3. Okay, so let me show you kubectl. I am going to show you migrate some resource from cluster 1 to cluster 2. Okay, so let's connect. kubectl get pod -n tomcat. So I want to migrate this application from cluster 1 to cluster 2, and this application running in the namespace. Okay, so first we have to take the backup. So already I have take the backup, Velero get backup, and you can see this application is running in this tomcat namespace. I have already take the backup. Okay, now let's connect to cluster 2. So I want to migrate this application from cluster 1 to from cluster 3 to cluster 1. So let's cluster 1. And kubectl get ns. You can see we don't have any the tomcat namespace, right? So this is my cluster 1 kubectl. So this is the command to see the cluster information, cluster info. So you can see this is my prod 1, and you can see here we don't have the namespace tomcat. Now I'm going to migrate this application, this tomcat application, from cluster 3 to cluster 1. So for that we have to also check Velero get back. Now you can see you have backup of this namespace. Now you are trying to restore from the backup. Okay, so where is the restore command? Now I'm going to migrate resource from cluster 1 to cluster 2. So I will explain the architecture, how do we configure the backup tool on both of the cluster, how do we take the backup in the common storage. That's why they can pick from the data from the common storage and they can restore it from the cluster 1. So now you can see kubectl get ns. Now you can see I have migrated resource from cluster 1 to cluster 2, and you can see 4 seconds ago they have migrated kubectl get all -n tomcat. So now you can see my application has been migrated and is pending and state because of the capacity issue I already explained. Okay, now let's show you the another things which we have discussed about the SPA, right? So now you can see they can back to the original position. So earlier it was the one pod, now you can see they have to delete it automatic the two pods. If you go there, see the SPA pods was in pending state. Okay, and when you see the load has been down, so automatic they can delete the all the pods, all the SPA pods, right, the application. So this thing we will discuss in very detailed way about we can start from the scratch level, like how do we migrate from on-prem Kubernetes cluster to cloud one, what are the planning, what are the pre and post planning, I will explain in the architecture. So and these are the thing we have to explain about day-to-day tasks, because once you have complete all the session, then you have to aware about like what's your day-to-day task in the Kubernetes production environment. Suppose if you attend Kubernetes related interview and if interview asks you tell me about your role and responsibility in the Kubernetes project, tell me about your day-to-day task. Okay, so that you can explain it like you have worked on this type of issue, you have worked on this type of customer requirement. So I will share my project detail, I will share my infrastructure details, so that you can explain to the interviewer like which type of cluster you have worked on, that how many total number of cluster, what are the version of cluster, which type of application running, how do we manage all the application, how do we manage the manifest file, how do we manage all the images, what are the team size, which type of application running, which all the backup tools are running, what all the tools are running over the cloud you have to manage. Okay, and I will share some common interview question, because I also took so many interview for my project, so I know like which type of question generally the interview ask you. So those questions I will share with you. I will share the some scenario based question with solution. I will share the sample CV, and I will discuss some Kubernetes project like customer requirement. So if you go there, yeah, I have created some project like related to customer project, so where the customer want to deploy some pods. Okay, and so this is the requirement, this is, so I will explain in my lab like how we'll fulfill the customer requirement. Like suppose we have one deployment file having two replica, the customer want to schedule both the pod in the single node. Suppose if the customer want to deploy, suppose in the replica you have three pods are there. Okay, and they want to schedule all the three pod in three different node, like pod 1 schedule in node 1, pod 2 in schedule 2, and pod 3 schedule in node 3. So how do we achieve this one? Okay, because so generally the candidate give the answer like we can apply the node selector. So that's the wrong answer. If you apply the node selector, then all the pod will be scheduled over the single node. Okay, so in this way, like you have to, this is the wrong answer. So those things we will uh, like how to fulfill this requirement. So these are all the things we have to cover in this session. Okay, so if you want to get more details, so you have to ping me. So you have to ping on my WhatsApp number. So let me show you my number. Yeah, WhatsApp number. So if you want to join the live session also, you can join the live session. Even I have also created the playlist, like if you want to give access the all the playlist, customer requirement, troubleshooting, so monitoring related and migration related playlist. So you can, I will give the access and also provide the support. If you have any doubt and queries, then you can ask me anytime. Okay, so this is the what all the things I have to cover. So this is just like a demo session. So these are the topics. And you can also see the feedback from student. They also got the multiple offers when they follow my series. My so they have a very good feedback on the session. So that's it. So if you have any more details, so you have to ping me separately, and I will explain. I will give more details about this. So this is the topic what I have to cover. So about all the requirement like day-to-day tasks, interview preparation, my project detail, infrastructure detail, say 100% question. As you can see, it's 100% practical. There's very less theory. Everything I have to show in my lab. Okay, so that's it.